The just war was started by Augustine. His first point was, a just war can only be waged as a last resort. All non-violent options must have been exhausted before the use of force can be justified.
A war is just only if it is waged by a legitimate authority. Even just causes cannot be served by actions taken by individuals or groups who do not constitute an authority sanctioned by whatever the society and outsiders to the society deem legitimate.
A just war can only be fought to redress a wrong suffered. For example, self-defence against an armed attack is always considered to be a just cause, although the justice of the cause is not significant. Further, a just war can only be fought with right intentions. The only permissible objective of a just war, is to redress the injury.
A war can only be just if it is fought with a reasonable chance of success. Deaths and injury occurred in a hopeless cause and not morally justifiable.
The ultimate goal of a just war is to re-establish peace. More specifically, the peace established after the war must be preferable to the peace that would have prevailed if the war had not been fought.
The violence used in the war must be proportional to the injury suffered. States are prohibited from using force not necessarily to attain the limited objective for addressing the injury suffered.
Civilians are never permissible targets of war, and every effort must be taken to avoid killing civilians. The deaths of civilians are justified only if they are unavoidable victims of a deliberate attack on a military target.
And that's just war theory.
The first war we're going to look at, to see if it's just, is the Jericho War as described in the Old Testament. Jericho was a city in the Promised Land, which is now described as Israel on the modern-day map. It was a well-established city with fertile land. The war was the Israelites versus the Canaanites. The Canaanites were declared barbaric by the Israelites. God led the Israelites to Jericho and said they should take it. It was seen as a defeat of false gods by the Israelite gods. And obviously the Israelites won. For point A, Jericho was not a last resort. The Israelites seeking to establish a nation on Canaan land. They weren't negotiating or anything, they were just coming there to destroy it. So for point A is a no. For point B, Israel was an organised society commanded by God, so there was no legitimate authority attacking. For point C, wrong suffered by the Israelite justice was on Canaanite side. So that's a no for C. It was not self-defence, and they were wrong too, so there was no read for it. Although outnumbered, the Israelites knew that God would assist them, so there was a very good chance of success. Yeah, for point E, Jubilees Israel's fought to found a nation that was not enough to live in peace. So peace hadn't been established, they just caused war basically. Injury suffered, however, the Israelites were not allowed to pillage or personally gain within it. So, and the violence, however the violence wasn't proportionate because they killed a lot of people and they burnt the whole place to the ground. So, point out, violence was not proportionate. And G, civilians were definite targets, they killed women, children, everybody. So, overall, Jericho was not a just war.
World War II started in September 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. It's the most widespread war in history, and the powers of the world were organised into two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis. The war involved the mobilisation of over 100 million military personnel, the greatest number ever mobilised in conflict. At point A, it was the last resort as people had a duty to protect Poland and Germany wouldn't listen to anything else. Point B, it was started by legitimate authorities who were the leaders of each country involved. It was fought on the redness of the wrong suffered, because Poland suffered and there wasn't really much that they could do about it, so it was up to other people to defend them. With so many countries against Germany, there was quite a reasonable chance of success. However, at one point Germany was on the winning side, but they carried on fighting. Point E, it was to re-establish peace, so that Poland wasn't being invaded by Germany anymore. Point F, the violence suffered in the war was not proportional to the injuries suffered as they used nuclear attack.
Who did?
The Americans. So there you go. F, hell no. The The weapons used in the war didn't discriminate between the people fighting and civilians. World War II works out to be pretty just because it was all justified by the fact that Germany asked for Poland. Hiroshima ended World War II when America decided to drop a nuclear bomb on Hiroshima and also one on Nagasaki. It killed 140,000 people in Hiroshima and 80,000 people in Nagasaki. Mainly civilians died, but on the 15th of August Japan announced a surrender which ended World War II. It was actioned after 6 months of firebombing and of 37 other Japanese countries. Point A, it was possibly a last resort because they had basically done everything else and it did end the war, so it was action by a legitimate authority who was Harry Truman, who was the president of the USA at that point. Point C, it was a retaliation of Pearl Harbor, which is why it was justified for the wrong suffered. Point D, there was a reasonable chance of success as quite a lot of people were going to be dead, so there's going to be less people to fight America. The ultimate goal was to re-establish peace, and it actually succeeded, so because Japan surrendered. F, the violence used in the war is horrifically not proportional to the injury suffered compared to like shooting people and then a massive bomb, so which continued to kill people for like ages after it had been dropped, which was pretty harsh. So yeah, that was a bitch slap. Point C, mainly civilians were killed, so yeah, they didn't really pay attention to not killing them at all. Overall, the reason to start the war was just, but the way that they carried it out wasn't.
The Vietnam War was between 1957 and 1975. It was between Northern Vietnam and the United States and the Southern Vietnam. The aim of the US in the war was to prevent a communist takeover of the South. The Vietnam War wasn't a last resort. It was raised by the US Army, so it was a legitimate authority. The war wasn't long suffered. From the American point of view, they thought there was a reasonable chance of success, but there wasn't, as there was a communist victory. It wasn't to re-establish peace, it was just to destroy the communists in Vietnam. The bombing was done by the US to the north, so it wasn't proportional. Civilians were hurt in the war as the cause of the bombs and other stuff used. Overall, it wasn't just a war because people got bombed.
And other points.
And other points made.
Just to summarise, basically, we've been looking at the just war theory in wars that we've looked at, along with the wars you've just seen. We've also done the Gulf War, the Iraq War, the Falklands War, the Cold War, World War I, and the Trojan War, which is a nice span throughout history. Basically, we've all come to the same sort of conclusion that the just ad bellum, as said by Augustine in the just war theory, which is the reason for going to war, has been followed. There have been cases like most wars are generally done for a proper reason. Well, not recently or in the past, but there have been wars that have been done for the right reason. For like the world wars, they were pretty good, but like Vietnam, nah. But yeah, so the just ad bellum, as said by Aquinas, has been followed. However, the just in bello, which is Augustine's technical term for how to carry out the war, like civilians and proportionality of stuff, hasn't actually been followed ever, that we've found. No war has really followed it, except maybe the Cold War, but the Cold War wasn't really a war. It was more like a really grown-up argument between countries. Yeah, that cost a lot of money. So yeah, so I hope you learnt a lot. It was our presentation by me, Jess, and Racheal. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned something.
Bring it, the action.